My name is Frank, and for 15 years, I was a senior hazardous materials technician with BioSafe Solutions, operating in the sprawling network of hospitals and clinics in the greater Chicago area. I've been in this line of work for a long time, handling, by my conservative estimate, over 20 million pounds of regulated medical waste. I've personally supervised the disposal of materials from over 3,000 distinct facilities, from the glistening towers of downtown surgical centers to the quiet, forgotten nursing homes on the city's frayed edges. I thought I understood the cycle of medicine from its grimmest, most disposable end. I've seen the aftermath of every tragedy and triumph that can happen inside a sterile room, and I believed I knew the absolute boundaries of what came out of a hospital. I had seen everything, or so I thought. But about 18 months ago, one container, a standard red biobin from a long-term care facility, changed everything I thought I knew about life, death, and what happens in the forgotten corners of our healthcare system. What I found inside that container was so profoundly disturbing, so medically impossible, that I reported it, lost my job, and haven't been able to sleep through the night since. That container didn't just contain waste. It contained a truth that shattered my entire reality. What I'm about to tell you sounds like something from a science fiction horror movie, but it's the absolute truth of why I'll never again set foot in a disposal facility. It is the story of my last day on the job. For a man in my line of work, routine is a form of armor. Protects you. You get up before the sun, pull on the steel-toed boots, the heavy-duty uniform that always smells faintly of industrial cleaner. You drink your coffee black and strong, and you go over your route for the day. For 15 years, that was my life. The route was a list of names and addresses, but to me, it was a map of human frailty. A dialysis center here, an oncology clinic there, a cosmetic surgeon's office, a dental practice. Each stop had its own particular flavor of waste, its own unique signature of sorrow or vanity. You learn to read the city not by its landmarks, but by its medical output. My truck was a specialized machine, a rolling fortress designed to keep the public safe from what I carried. The cargo bay was refrigerated, compartmentalized, and secured with locks that would frustrate a bank robber. Every pickup was a ritual governed by federal and state law. Department of Transportation, OSHA, the EPA, they were the invisible passengers riding shotgun, their rulebooks my Bible. You check the manifest, you count the containers, you weigh them on the truck's integrated scale. You sign here, they sign there. A chain of custody is established, a sacred paper trail that follows every ounce of biohazardous material from the moment it's discarded to the moment it's rendered inert in our facility's autoclave. The job desensitizes you. It has to. In the beginning, you can't help but wonder about the stories behind the waste. A bag heavy with blood-soaked gauze from an emergency room. What happened to that person? A dozen empty chemotherapy vials. Did the treatment work? A sharps container filled to the brim with used needles. How many patients, how much pain? But you learn to stop asking those questions. You have to see it as just material. You see it as Category A infectious substances, as pathological waste, as trace chemo. It has a UN number, a packing group, a disposal protocol. It's not a piece of a person's life. It's just freight. That's the only way to stay sane. Our facility was on the industrial outskirts of the city, a place of concrete and steel where the air hummed with the sound of heavy machinery. The smell is the first thing anyone new would notice. It's not a simple smell of decay. It's a complex, layered assault on the senses. The sharp, sterile scent of disinfectant, the metallic tang of blood, the acrid bite of chemicals, and underneath it all, the low, persistent hum of organic matter breaking down. To me, it was just the smell of the office. Inside, the process was a marvel of brutal efficiency. A series of conveyors would feed the sealed containers into a massive autoclave, essentially a pressure cooker the size of a school bus. Superheated steam at 270 degrees Fahrenheit would penetrate the waste, killing any and all pathogens. After the cycle, the sterilized material, now just harmless, soggy trash, was fed into an industrial shredder that could chew through steel. What came out the other end was a confetti of plastic and paper, unrecognizable and safe for landfill. It was a violent, loud, and definitive end to things. The day it all went wrong started like any other. It was a Tuesday in late autumn, the sky the color of lead. I was on my second-to-last pickup of the day, a facility called the Serene Meadows Residence. It was one of those places that tried to look more like a resort than a nursing home. Manicured lawns, a fancy fountain out front, a nameplate in elegant cursive. It was a high-end, long-term care facility, the kind of place where wealthy families sent their elderly relatives for their final years. We'd been servicing them for a decade. Their waste was always predictable. Adult diapers, medication packaging, feeding tube supplies, the occasional sharps container from insulin injections. It was routine, mundane. I backed the truck up to the loading bay, a small, clean area behind the kitchens. The facility's janitor, a guy I'd seen 100 times, but whose name I never learned, was waiting for me with the cart. He had 3 red biohazard bins, the standard 96-gallon roll-away type. I checked the manifest. 3 containers, estimated weight 75 pounds each. Standard. I wheeled the first 2 onto the truck's lift gate and onto the scale. 74 pounds. 76 pounds. Well within the margin of error. Then I got to the 3rd container. The moment I put my hands on it, something felt off. I'm a big guy, and I've been moving these things for a long time. I know what 75 pounds feels like. This was more. Significantly more. I grunted a little as I pulled it onto the lift. The janitor didn't seem to notice, just stared off into the middle distance, waiting for me to be done. I raised the lift and pushed the container onto the scale. The digital display flickered and then settled. 142 pounds. Almost double the manifest weight. Now, weight discrepancies happen. It's usually a sign of laziness or cheapness. A facility trying to save a few bucks by tossing regular, heavy garbage into a biobin instead of paying for a separate commercial waste pickup. It was a finable offense, and it was my job to flag it. I made a note on my handheld scanner, marking the container for inspection back at the plant. As I was locking the container into place inside the truck, I noticed something else. A smell. It cut through the usual loading dock odors of disinfectant and kitchen grease. It was wrong. It wasn't the coppery smell of blood or the sickly sweet smell of decay I was used to. It was chemical, sharp like ozone, but with a weirdly organic, bog-like undertone. Like a swamp in a server room. I'd never smelled anything quite like it. I shrugged it off. New cleaning agent, maybe. Some kind of industrial floor stripper. I finished the paperwork, got the janitor's signature, and closed up the truck. But as I pulled away from Serene Meadows, I couldn't shake a feeling of unease. It was a tiny crack in the armor of my routine, a dissonant note in a song I'd heard 1,000 times. Back at the plant, the evening shift was in full swing. The air was thick with steam from the autoclave and the roar of the shredder was a constant presence. I parked the truck in the receiving bay and began the process of unloading. I was working with a younger guy, Carlos. He was good at his job, diligent, but he hadn't been in the business long enough to have the life scared out of him yet. He still had a bit of a morbid curiosity about it all. Got a flagged one from Serene Meadows, I told him, pointing to the heavy container. Major weight discrepancy. Probably full of old phone books and kitty litter. Always the fancy places trying to cheat the system, Carlos said with a grin, shaking his head. Let's pull it over to the inspection bay, I said. Gotta follow the book on this one. The inspection bay was a separate, contained room with its own ventilation system. It was where we opened containers that were damaged, leaking, or, like this one, flagged for a manual audit. We put on extra PPE, a face shield and a heavy rubber apron over our usual gear. Protocol was protocol. We maneuvered the heavy bin into the bay and sealed the door. The roar of the plant subsided to a dull hum, and in that relative quiet, I heard it. A sound. It was faint, incredibly so. A soft, rhythmic pulse. Thump-thump. Pause. Thump-thump. Pause. You hear that? I asked Carlos, holding up a hand for silence. He tilted his head, listening. Hear what? The number 2 conveyor belt is acting up again. Squeaky bearing. No, not that, I said, leaning closer to the container. Listen. I put my ear against the cool plastic of the bin. The sound was clearer now. It was low and steady. Thump-thump. Thump-thump. It was a deeply unsettling sound to hear coming from a box of what was supposed to be dead, inert material. It sounded mechanical, but not quite. There was a wetness to it, a squelching quality that made the hair on my arms stand up. This is probably a medical device, Carlos offered, ever the rational one. Someone tossed a piece of equipment with a battery still in it. Pump or something. It was a plausible explanation. It happened from time to time. And for pump, a sequential compression device. But they didn't sound like this. Their beeps and whirs were high-pitched, electronic. This was a bass note, a deep, resonant pulse that you felt in your chest as much as you heard it. And what about the smell? I asked, tapping the lid. The strange ozone and swamp odor was much stronger here in the enclosed room. Carlos sniffed the air. Whoa, yeah, that's weird. Smells like a dead battery and a biology experiment. My professional curiosity was now warring with a primal sense of dread. My training told me to document, to be methodical. But my gut was screaming at me that this was not a simple case of a mispacked bin. Something was fundamentally wrong. All right, I said, my voice sounding more confident than I felt. Let's open it. Slowly, we unlatched the heavy lid. Standard procedure was to lift it and step back in case of any aerosolized pathogens. We lifted it together. The smell hit us like a physical blow, and Carlos gagged, taking a step back. It was overpowering now. A thick, cloying miasma of chemicals and rot appeared inside. The top layer was exactly what I expected. Red biohazard bags, tightly sealed, filled with soiled linens, plastic tubing, and disposable gowns. Standard refuse from a long-term care facility. But beneath them, nestled in the center of the bin, was something that was not standard at all. It was a box. It wasn't cardboard or plastic. It was a dull, gray metal cube, about 2 feet on each side. The corners were welded shut, and the surface was cold to the touch. It had no markings, no labels, no warnings. But I knew what that metal was. I'd seen it before in shipments from radiology departments. It was lead, a lead-lined box, the kind used to transport and shield radioactive materials. Radiopharmaceuticals, brachytherapy seeds, things that required a completely different, far more stringent manifest and handling protocol. This was not a minor violation. This was a major, 5-alarm, career-ending breach of every rule in the book. And the sound, the soft, rhythmic thump-thump, was coming from inside it. Frank. What is that? Carlos whispered, his earlier confidence gone, replaced by a look of genuine fear. That, I said, my heart starting to pound in time with the rhythm from the box, is something that should not be here. My first instinct, the one drilled into me by 15 years of training, was to call my supervisor. This was above my pay grade, way above. I backed out of the inspection bay, leaving Carlos standing there like a statue, staring at the lead box. I pulled out my phone and dialed Dave Miller, the plant supervisor. Dave was a company man through and through. He'd been a technician once, but years behind a desk had sanded away any sense of curiosity he might have had, replacing it with a deep-seated fear of anything that might create paperwork or attract the attention of regulators. He answered on the second ring, his voice already annoyed. Miller. Dave, it's Frank. I'm in the inspection bay. We've got a problem with that flagged container from Serene Meadows. What is it, Frank? Did they dump a filing cabinet in there? Just document it, slap them with the fine, and process the rest. I've got a P&L report to finish. It's not that, Dave, I said, trying to keep my voice even. There's a sealed, lead-lined container inside the bin. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, calculating the potential fallout. A lead-lined box meant radiological material. Undeclared radiological material was a nightmare. It meant notifying the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. It meant a possible plant shutdown, a federal investigation. Are you sure? He finally asked, his voice low and tense. It's a 2-foot cube welded shut. It's lead, Dave. I know what lead looks like. And there's a sound coming from it, a rhythmic pulsing. Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. The annoyance was gone, replaced by a cold, hard edge. Frank, did you open the bin? Of course I did. It was flagged for a weight audit. That's the protocol. The protocol is to identify the source of the weight discrepancy, not to go on a treasure hunt, he snapped. What's the status of the container now? It's in the inspection bay. The bin is open, but the lead box is untouched. Good, he said, a note of relief in his voice. Here's what you're going to do. You and Carlos are going to close up that biobin. Seal it. You're going to remove the audit flag from the system. Then you're going to put that container on the conveyor and you're going to send it straight to the autoclave. You understand me? I was stunned. To the autoclave? Dave, we can't do that. If there's radiological material in there, it could aerosolize. Could contaminate the entire system. We have to follow procedure. Forget procedure, he hissed into the phone. Procedure is what gets us $1 million fine and our license suspended. Serene Meadows is our biggest long-term care contract. You think they're going to thank us for calling the feds on them? No. They'll drop us and corporate will have my head. Whatever is in that box is their problem. They put it in our bin. We process what's in our bins. End of story. But the sound, Dave, I insisted, my voice pleading. It sounds like a pump or something alive. I don't care if it's singing opera. Frank, he shouted, losing his composure. You are not to open that box. That is a direct order. You process that container, you delete the audit log, and you forget this conversation ever happened. Am I clear? The line went dead. I stood there in the hallway, the phone still pressed to my ear, the dull roar of the plant sounding distant and strange. I had been given a direct order to break half a dozen federal laws and, more than that, to ignore a mystery that was now clawing at the inside of my skull. He wasn't just telling me to ignore a problem. He was telling me to destroy the evidence. I walked back into the inspection bay. Carlos looked at me, his eyes wide. What did Dave say? He said to process it. I said flatly. Carlos's shoulders slumped with relief. Oh, okay, good. Man, you had me scared for a minute there. Let's just do what he said, Frank. It's not our problem. But it was my problem. It had become my problem the moment I heard that soft, insistent beat. For 15 years, I had prided myself on my professionalism, my adherence to the rules that kept people safe. My job was to handle the dangerous things so that no one else had to. And now my boss was telling me to take the most dangerous-looking thing I had ever seen and blindly feed it into the fire. I looked at the lead box, sitting there amidst the red bags of medical refuse. Thump, 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 thump. It was a patient sound, a persistent rhythm that felt ancient and wrong. What kind of pump runs on a battery that can last this long inside a sealed lead box? Why would you shield a simple piece of equipment so heavily? The explanations weren't adding up. The desire for a rational answer was being drowned out by a wave of pure, unadulterated dread. No, I said, more to myself than to Carlos. No? What do you mean, no? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. Frank, Dave said. I don't care what Dave said. I interrupted, my gaze fixed on the box. We're not destroying that. Not until I know what's inside. This was the moment my career ended. I knew it even then. I was defying a direct order, threatening a major contract, and stepping into a world of trouble I couldn't possibly fathom. I was choosing my own nagging conscience over my job, my pension, and the simple, quiet life I had built for myself. I was becoming morally isolated, a man on a tiny island of his own making, with Carlos and Dave and the entire company on the far shore, shaking their heads. Frank, don't do this, Carlos pleaded. It's not worth it. Whatever is in there, it's not our business. We're just the garbage men. He was right. We were. But something in me, some long-dormant protective instinct, had woken up. I didn't know what was in that box, but I felt a sudden, fierce need to protect it. Or, perhaps, to protect the world from it. Couldn't tell which. All I knew was that I couldn't let it be destroyed. Go back to the floor, Carlos, I said quietly. Tell Dave we had a problem with the latch on the bin and it's taking a while to secure. Buy me some time. He hesitated, torn between loyalty to me and fear of our boss. Fear 1. He nodded mutely, stripped off his extra PPE, and scurried out of the inspection bay, leaving me alone with the box and its relentless, beating heart. The first challenge was how to open it. The box was welded shut. It wasn't designed to be opened. It was designed to be a tomb. I went to the maintenance locker, my mind racing. I couldn't use anything that would make a lot of noise, like a grinder. Dave would be down here in a second. I needed leverage. I found a long, heavy-duty crowbar and a set of industrial chisels. It would be slow, quiet work. I returned to the bay and sealed the door again. The room was silent now except for that damnable sound. Thump thump, thump thump. It seemed louder now, as if it knew I was there, as if it were calling to me. I took a deep breath, the ozone and swamp smell filling my lungs, and set the tip of the chisel against the welded seam on the lid. For the next hour, I worked in a state of hyper-focused fear. Every scrape of metal on metal sounded like a gunshot to me. I kept expecting the door to fly open and for Dave to be standing there, his face purple with rage. I wedged the chisel into the seam and hammered it with the butt of the crowbar, trying to muffle the blows with a heavy cloth. It was slow, agonizing work. The lead was soft, but the weld was strong. Little by little, a crack began to form. I worked the crowbar into it, putting all my weight on the end. The metal groaned in protest. The smell intensified, leaking from the growing gap. It was a nauseating perfume, and I had to pause several times to keep from vomiting inside my face shield. Finally, with a sickening lurch, one side of the lid popped free. I pried it up, my muscles screaming in protest. The lid was incredibly heavy, and I had to wrestle it off the box and let it fall to the floor with a heavy, muffled thud. I leaned over the open box, my heart hammering against my ribs. The thumping sound was clear and distinct now, no longer muffled by the lead. Inside, the box was not empty. It was filled with a thick, translucent, yellowish gel that quivered slightly. It looked like some kind of nutrient bath or preservation medium. And suspended in the center of that gel, held in place by a delicate-looking framework of wires and clamps, was the source of the sound. It was a human heart. I stumbled back, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. It was a real, biological, human heart. I could see the aorta, the pulmonary artery, the ventricles. It was slick and red and unmistakably organic. But it was also wrong. Tiny, hair-thin wires, finer than anything I'd ever seen, were inserted directly into the muscle tissue. They snaked through the gel and connected to a small, black, metallic device at the bottom of the box. The device had a single, faintly glowing blue light, and the heart was beating. Thump thump. The muscle contracted, a full, healthy, powerful beat. It squeezed and relaxed in the gel, moving with a life of its own. It was not attached to a body. It was not connected to any external machinery, save for the small black box it rested on. It was a living, beating heart in a box, sustained by some unholy marriage of biology and technology that I couldn't begin to comprehend. I felt a wave of vertigo wash over me. My entire understanding of the world, of the boundaries between life and death, science and horror, seemed to crumble in that instant. This wasn't medical waste. This wasn't a piece of equipment. This was something else, something impossible. My brain, scrambling for a rational explanation, started throwing out possibilities. A research specimen? An organ for transplant being kept alive with some experimental new technology? But why would it be thrown away? Why would it be hidden in a regular biobin at a nursing home? And why would my company want to destroy it without question? The truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't a disposal. This was a cover-up. Serene Meadows wasn't just a quiet place for the elderly to live out their final days. It was a front, a laboratory. They were doing things there, things so far beyond the pale of accepted medical ethics that they had to dispose of their failures like common trash. This was a failed experiment. The nutrient gel, with its foul smell, was probably starting to break down. The specimen was no longer viable for whatever dark purpose they had intended it for. So they threw it away. My fear was replaced by a cold, white-hot rage. This wasn't just a violation of disposal regulations. This was a violation of humanity. This heart had belonged to someone. It was a piece of a person, kept beating in a box by some monstrous technology, only to be discarded when it was no longer useful. The protective instinct I'd felt earlier now had a name. It was justice. I knew I couldn't trust my company. Dave's order made that clear. They were complicit, or at the very least, they were willing to look the other way to protect a valuable contract. I was completely and utterly alone in this. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to act. I pulled out my phone, the one Dave hated us carrying on the floor. I switched it to video mode, the little red light a defiant beacon in the sterile room. I filmed everything. The open bio bin, the lead box on the floor, and then I moved in close, my phone's camera focusing on the impossible thing floating in the gel. I filmed the heart as it beat, the wires, the strange black device. I narrated what I was seeing, my voice a strained whisper, documenting the container number, the client, the time, the date. I created my own chain of custody, a digital one that they couldn't shred or burn. After I finished recording, I knew I couldn't leave it there. If I did, Dave would find it and it would disappear into the autoclave, and my video would be meaningless without the physical evidence. I had to get it out of the facility. This was the biggest risk of all. Taking it would be theft. It would be a violation of a dozen more rules. But leaving it was unthinkable. I found a smaller, sealable transport cooler, the kind we used for sending samples out to labs. It was a struggle, but I managed to carefully lift the glass container out of the lead box. The gel sloshed, and the heart inside bobbed, but its rhythm never faltered. Thump thump, thump thump. I placed the whole apparatus into the cooler and sealed the lid. The lead box I left where it was. It was too heavy to move, and it was evidence in its own right. My shift was over. I clocked out, my face a mask of false calm. I walked past Dave's office. He was on the phone, his back to the door. He didn't see me. I carried the cooler, which just looked like a lunchbox, out to my personal car, my heart pounding with every step. I placed it gently on the passenger seat, buckled it in like a child, and drove away from BioSafe Solutions for the last time. The entire drive home, I was terrified. I kept checking my rearview mirror, expecting to see flashing lights. I felt like a fugitive. On the seat next to me, I could feel a faint, rhythmic vibration through the plastic of the cooler. It was a constant reminder of the impossible cargo I was carrying. I didn't know who to trust. The police? What would I tell them? Hello, officer. I've stolen a beating human heart from my job? They'd think I was insane. They'd probably arrest me and hand the evidence right back to my company, who would make it disappear. I needed someone outside the usual channels, someone who understood the complexities of medical regulations and who wouldn't be easily intimidated by a wealthy corporation. After a sleepless night spent staring at the cooler on my kitchen table, I found a name. It was an investigative journalist I'd seen on a local news program, a woman who had broken a story about corruption in the state's hospital inspection system. She seemed tenacious, unafraid. I found her email address and sent her a short, cryptic message. I have physical proof of illegal medical experiments being conducted at a Chicago area long-term care facility. I have the evidence. It is time-sensitive. Then I called in sick to work. I knew I'd never be going back. The journalist, a woman named Sarah, agreed to meet me at a neutral location, a quiet diner halfway across the state. I brought the cooler. I showed her the video on my phone first. She watched it, her expression shifting from skepticism to disbelief to fascinated horror. Then I opened the cooler. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She stared at the beating heart for a full minute without saying a word. The rhythmic pulse filled the silence in the car. "My God," she whispered. "It's real." From that moment on, things moved very quickly, but not in the way I had hoped. Sarah was a professional. She knew this was too big for just a news story, at least at first. She had contacts. She made a call, and the next day, we were sitting in a sterile government office with two people who introduced themselves as investigators from the state's Department of Public Health, Division of Healthcare Facility Regulation. I told them everything. I gave them my phone with the video. I handed over the cooler. They were professionals, their faces unreadable, but I could see a flicker of shock in their eyes when they looked inside. They assured me I had done the right thing. They promised a full investigation. They took my statement, sealed the cooler in an official evidence bag, and told me they would be in touch. For a few days I felt a sense of relief. I had done it. I had exposed the darkness lurking behind the manicured lawns of Serene Meadows. I had sacrificed my job, but I had done the right thing. Then the backlash began. The first call was from BioSafe's corporate legal department. I was summarily fired for gross misconduct, violation of company policy, and theft of client property. They informed me that they were considering pressing criminal charges. They claimed I was a disgruntled employee attempting to extort a valued client. The second blow came from my own union. When I tried to file a grievance for wrongful termination, they refused to represent me. Dave and Carlos, pressured by the company, had given statements that I had acted erratically, that I had a history of paranoia, and that I had violated direct orders and safety protocols. I was radioactive. No one would touch me. The official investigation stalled. Sarah, the journalist, kept me updated. The Serene Meadows residents, backed by a team of high-powered lawyers, stonewalled the investigators. They claimed the object was a non-human synthetic organ analog used for testing a new type of preservation medium. They produced fabricated paperwork and research logs. They claimed its disposal in a standard biobin was a simple clerical error by a low-level employee, who was promptly fired. Their story was absurd, a transparent lie. But they had power and money, and I was just a fired truck driver. The final, soul-crushing blow came about a month later. The beating heart, the impossible thing in the box, the very core of the entire case, disappeared. It vanished from the state's evidence locker. The official story was a clerical misfiling. It was gone. My video was now just a video, easily dismissed as a hoax or a misunderstanding. Without the physical proof, the case against Serene Meadows collapsed. They were eventually given a modest fine for improper waste disposal. A slap on the wrist. A rounding error in their budget. The system hadn't just failed. It had actively conspired to protect the guilty. The institutional betrayal was absolute. I had trusted the process, and the process had chewed me up and spit me out to protect its wealthy and powerful clients. My 15 years of loyal service, my perfect record, my adherence to the very rules they claimed to uphold. It all meant nothing. I was left with nothing. No job, no pension, no reputation. The savings I had built up over a lifetime dwindled away as I tried to find work, but my name had been tarnished in the small world of hazardous material disposal. I was the guy who went crazy, the guy who stole from a client. I had to sell my house. I moved into a small apartment and eventually found a job as a night shift janitor at a community college. The work is quiet. I push a broom. I empty trash cans filled with nothing more sinister than paper and soda cans. It's a world away from the life I knew. But I'm not the same man. The experience shattered something fundamental inside me. My belief in order, in the rules, in the idea that our institutions are there to protect us, all gone. I now see the world as a place with a thin, fragile veneer of civilization, and just beneath it, a darkness that is terrifyingly real and powerful. I never found out the true purpose of that beating heart. Was it for a black market transplant for some billionaire? Was it part of a military experiment to create soldiers who couldn't be killed? Was it a search for immortality? I'll never know. The truth was buried under a mountain of money and legal maneuvering. Sometimes, in the dead of night, when the college is empty and silent, I can still hear it. Thump thump, thump thump. A soft, rhythmic beat that no one else can hear. It's the sound of the secret I carry. The sound of the life that was stolen, commodified, and discarded. It's the sound that cost me everything, but in a way it also set me free. I no longer live in ignorance of the monsters that walk among us in lab coats and business suits. I know what they're capable of, and that knowledge, as terrible as it is the only thing they couldn't take from me. I look at the world differently now. I know that the most disturbing things aren't always in the red bags marked biohazard. Sometimes, they're in the clean rooms, wearing the whitest coats, with the best of intentions and the darkest of secrets.